Welcome to Becoming and Belonging, a journey of identity and culture. I'm your host, Amy Huggins from Ascension Wellness. Each week, we embark on a journey of discovering who we truly are, navigating the nuance of identity and culture, and learning what it means to belong in our own skin and in the world. Our guest, Ernest Wood, is joining us to talk about turning challenges into growth. Ernie is a father, grandfather, husband, U.S. Navy submariner veteran, author, and coach of high achievers, helping others to master your life with balance. Raised by a single mother who was only 14, grew up in a small town, and around 40 decided he didn't like the guy he had become. So with lots of work and many failures, made the changes he needed to make to love the guy he sees in the mirror. Ernie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Amy.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your journey. What brings you here?
Yeah, I loved what you were talking about, succeeding after challenges. Pretty much my childhood was a challenge, being raised by a 14-year-old mother. Basically, she was a lot of siblings are closer of age than or as further away in age than my mother and I were. But just had a lot of challenges, got into some trouble. Um, Actually, I got into trouble. I got caught stealing the same week that I found out that I was going to be a father for the first time. And that was why I joined the Navy. So, joined the Navy, got some discipline out of it. But I also got some negative stuff out of there. I learned a lot about whining and complaining a little more than I did before. And then I worked in the power industry after that, continued on being a pretty negative guy about a lot of things in life. Got into car sales after all the power plants closed down. And that's when I actually started working on it a little before then, but dealing with people all the time, you can't be, you cannot not like yourself and be able to sell things. So that was how I changed or why I started changing.
Because of the way your personal self-image was impacting your job.
Yeah. Yeah. I just never, like I said, like when I looked at myself, I mean, I had moments of happiness, right? I needed some validation from the outside. I was, I didn't have any gratitude. I didn't, no forgiveness. I had my little set way of doing things, and that was the only thing that mattered.
Reading over your information was one thing that really, really stood out to me was the fact that you were raised by a 14-year-old mother. You are, because I was raised by a 14-year-old mother, and you were the very first other person I have ever met that can say the same thing. It comes with a very unique set of experiences.
I 100% agree with you. You're almost like growing up with your mom at the same time, right?
That's exactly what it's like. And, for me, I was also a teen mom. I was 16 when I got pregnant and 17 when my first son was born. And by that point, I was still a teen mom for sure, but also I had already raised my mother. I had already partially raised my brother. I had raised myself. So I kind of felt like I've been doing it for a while by the time I became a parent, which is going to be part of me did, right? And then other parts of me, yeah, I was absolutely still a teen mom. How old were you when you had your first child?
I was 20, like right around the 2019-20 area. Um, yeah, so but I was already my first wife already had a son, so I think 17, 18 is when I had a stepchild.
Mhm.
So a little bit of that in there. But I was so over the top like disciplinarian because I didn't want my kids to, do some of the stupid crap that I did from not having a dad around, right? And or, because my mom was there, but she was trying to work. She was trying to raise my brothers and so she wasn't always there. And plus she was also growing up, so she was still going to school. She ended up getting her master's and stuff like that. But there was a lot of little things that she never even learned in life. She actually just passed March this year with cancer, totally ravaged her entire body. But a lot of it, I think, was due to she never learned forgiveness in her life. Like she held every single grudge to the day she died. It even give you a quick story. We got in a fight about 3.5 years ago, and it took about 2.5 years for us to even talk again. But we were headed down the right spot. And when we found out she just had a stroke, she ended up in the hospital. I was like the executor to all the will and everything, but to come to find out when it came down to it, she actually cut me out of the will, uh, took me off of the executor thing, and then she still held a grudge. Even like when the last words she ever said to me was, I told her, "Hey, mom, I forgive you, for all this stuff, and I hope you forgive me, and I wish this never happened." And then she said, "Well, you can shit in one hand and wish in the other." And that was the last word she ever even said to me. So, like knowing that somebody can go out like with a grudge to their oldest son, it was a stupid fight 3 years ago. It was a big change in my mentality. I don't ever want to go out holding a grudge to anybody.
That is such an important story. Thank you for sharing that because I know that there's got to be a lot of depth, a lot of pain in that story. And it's interesting too because I feel like you just told a little piece of my story with my mom. Um, 2 years before my mom died, she cut me out of her life when I held the first boundary I'd ever held in my entire life with her. So it's a little different than your story, but a little similar too. She just wasn't able to work through her internal state to seek a resolution. So I'm very sorry that that was your experience.
Yeah, that's crazy that
I know.
we're twins from a different like galaxy or something.
Right? It's the most interesting thing for people to be able to connect on. And that's also one reason why I love having these conversations is because we do find those connection points and it's just fascinating. So tell me a little bit more about, I'm really curious. You talk a lot about going from asshole to awesome. How do you think you came to be at that starting place of asshole to begin with?
I think asshole was just like the guy that I felt like I was. When I say it to my friends, they were like, "Oh, when were you an asshole?" But they only saw like because when you hang around a certain group, everybody's that certain mentality, right? I I was a funny guy, like I had a ton of friends, but all my jokes were either racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever. I mean, whatever is there was, right? I judged everybody. I didn't have gratitude for anything. I think I, in some ways, because of the way I grew up, it was like anything that I could scrape and grab I was owed. I didn't have really accountability for anything. I always blamed everybody else for all my crap and all those negative things inside of me. I I just felt like I just always knew I didn't like who I was. Like I could be better, and I always tried to be better, but I didn't even know where to start. And even with reading all those books and everything, like they always like it's a lot of them will give you the shiny road, right? Like this is the road to get better. But if you don't even know your starting point, it's hard to put in the direction that you're going. Somebody once told me, I think it was just a couple days ago, that on your GPS system, you can put in your final destination, but it has to know where you're starting from to give you the roadmap to get to where you're going, right? And that's what I found. I just didn't know where I was actually.
Man, that's such an important piece of the whole dynamic. So I'm a trauma recovery coach and I talk to clients a lot about, I use the GPS system too, and talk about, okay, we have to set our destination where we're going, and those are going to be the goals that we work on that, in our work together, right? So that I can support them as the co-navigator to help them get to where they want to be. And I describe what is in between where they are and where they're going is the trauma obstacle course. And so that's going to be the path that we navigate. And as a trauma expert, I can help them navigate that and be like, okay, the quickest route to achieving your goal is going to be for us to take a right up ahead. And maybe they're in the space where that resonates, or they're like, okay, let's take a right up ahead. Or maybe something in them is just like, nope, I'm not ready for that yet. We're going to take the scenic route and I'm going left. And that's okay. We can go left and we can take the scenic route because that's what their system needs.
Yeah.
You really landed on an important piece of that puzzle, and that's where you're starting from. Tell me more about that. How did you learn that about yourself?
Like I said, I just really did not feel good inside when I saw like when I looked at myself in the mirror. I've always been disciplined in certain things in life, but I lack discipline in other areas. Like I've always been physically fit. I am super like almost anal about it. I have a certain fitness level that I maintain, and but there's a whole lot of other things on the other side of my balance that was just out of whack. Like I had no emotional control. I had patience of the no patience, basically. Horrible road rage. Um, just you can just name all the different. I mean, there's just so many bad things that I felt like I had, and and it all came like I always tell this story, and it's in the book of like it all wrapped up and tied itself in a nice little bow on one of my road rage incidents. I was driving down the road, listening to Brian Tracy talk about, don't give your emotions away to somebody else. And this dude cuts me off. And I absolutely lose my crap. I'm pissed off. I'm honking my horn, flipping the dude off. I cut off somebody to try to get around him. He cuts me off again. We're going down the road probably for like 5, 10 minutes, 80 to 100 miles an hour, just back and forth. But when I finally get next to the guy, I look back and I see there was a kid in his car.
Mm.
And I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, and then I remember the time that I did it with my kids in the car. And it was just like that was the moment where I knew that there was no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going to change. And, and then I did like what Brian Tracy's, talked about. I stopped giving my emotions to somebody else. I took control of where my response, I stopped reacting to stuff and I responded. And that started with being able to learn how to breathe, some breathing techniques, some meditation. And then from there, I went on to gratitude, being grateful for everything I had. And then the big one was forgiveness. Like, couldn't stand my dad, did not like the guy. When he died, it was like, whatever, he passed. Um, so I never forgave him. But what I found out is I was more mad about the stuff that I did. And when I was able to forgive myself, which took so much work, but then when I forgave myself, and then I was able to forgive like everybody else down the road. And yeah, man. So it was like, doing those little things and then starting to take accountability for my stuff. Yeah, that was the big changes. That was where I just knew that I had to be a better person.
Mm. It sounds almost like an unraveling. It's almost like you were, and I'm sure a lot of people can identify with some version of this. Maybe you were just all tied up in knots and guarded because we're not taught what to do with our emotions. We're not taught how to forgive or how to deal with that rage that crops up from other drivers and different things like that. We all have our own experiences, our own triggers, but what do you do with it? And so we go into this like guardedness and we throw up our walls. And as you're talking, it's almost like the wall started to drop. And what was maybe once hard started to open and soften.
Yeah, I like the way you say that because it was like I was a big ball or a knot of just anger. Um, and again, I think a lot of it just stem from, having a hard feeling towards my dad for not being there. And some of the little things with my mom because she was still learning how to even be an adult or be a person at the same time she was trying to be a parent. And then like a lot of the male role models that I had, they weren't very good. Most of them were living off the system, kind of leeching on to whatever they can get for free. And there was no like solid discipline. And that's what I found later in life is having a coach or a mentor is huge because without one, it's hard to stay on a path, right? You have to have a certain amount of I mean, and most people don't have it. Like we're gonna fall off, we're gonna go, but if you have somebody there that helps push you along the way, like it's like bowling when you're young, right? When they put up those little boards and you throw that ball down and it's gonna reach the final thing. That's kind of what parents are for kids, right? That's what they should be in a way, at least, allow them to make some mistakes, but keep them on that lane. And without parents around, I believe that's part of the problem nowadays is kids are hopping in all kinds of lanes that they probably shouldn't be in because they don't have anybody there to smack them and put them back into the right lane.
Right. There's no guidance. I like that analogy with the gutter bumpers.
Yeah,
It
that's what
is
they're called.
important that we are able to make our mistakes and learn and grow from it without someone swooping in to rescue from our learning, but also to not allow us to get so off track.
That's 100% because I think mistakes are the only way that you actually can grow and learn. And that's another problem that what we run into in the world today. Nobody's allowed to lose. Like everybody has to get a little winner trophy. And people are going to argue with me about that, but it does nothing for anybody. If you only learn how to win and you're not going to be able to fully succeed in life because the biggest the biggest wins or learning experiences come from losses and learning how to handle a loss. Like even just learning how to lose is so vital to what life is going to bring you.
Man, enormously so. And and also there's an opportunity there to reframe and to teach kids to reframe. Did you really lose? Is it really about winning and losing? What did you learn from this? Did you have fun? I'm thinking if you use the trophy example, and I'm thinking of, soccer kids and everybody gets a trophy. So let's say everybody doesn't get a trophy. Let's say the team that wins the number of points, the most points gets the trophy. That doesn't mean that the losing team are losers. So how can we help those kids learn? Hey, did you have fun? Isn't that what we're here for? Did you learn more about the game? I mean, when they're little, they don't really care about the game. They just care about getting out there and having fun. So how can we teach them to lean into that and embrace that and see that as winning? And also to reframe what it means to fail. I love the Thomas Edison quote. He never failed at making a light bulb. He just learned 10,000 ways how not to make a light bulb. So how can we teach that to our kids?
That's a great and in my book again, I talk about I was Bobby Knight like on steroids. I was a crazy coach. Um, I didn't I didn't allow mistakes. I didn't allow imperfections. Everything had to be perfect. And like all my kids got better, like all the teams, we got better, but I think they didn't enjoy a lot of it. I mean, it, and it's a good thing, bad thing, right? So you could take discipline to that level, which now that's bad. But there has to be a certain amount, right? And sometimes the kids actually respond and like having a little foot in their butt and moving them in the right direction. It's crazy how resilient kids are. But as an adult, we need to teach them that it's okay not to be perfect, right? And that's where I was. Like, I didn't want any of my kids not to be perfect because I didn't want anybody to think I wasn't a perfect coach.
Right.
right? And not being a perfect coach was my mental hang up of making mistakes. Um, and again, that went back to the forgiveness thing because I didn't allow myself to make mistakes. But I finally learned through a coaching course, Brian Johnson, that like I love it because I was always win or lose. There was no, it was black and white. There was absolutely nothing in between. But with this course, I learned either you win or you learn, and learning is winning. So you're always winning.
Right.
And once I was able to take that approach in life, man, it just freed you up. Like I use the little analogy of like, the ticks in a jar. When you have the lid on, the ticks are just going to jump up, and then sooner or later they learn how high to jump. And they could easily jump out of the jar, but once you take that lid off after they've been trained, now they only have a certain level that they can jump to. And that was the same thing that was happening in my mind. I had a I had a cap on myself so bad because I never wanted to make a mistake or be imperfect. And once I figured that out, man, it opened up that like now I'm hopping, like I'm jumping out of that thing.
Oh, that's such a fun analogy. So, what does that look like for you to be able to hop higher, to be able to really grow into who you are?
The big thing is like it's coaching now, right? I'm able to take what I did and actually help other people get some balance in their life. Too many people were taught, to succeed, you have to just work as hard as you can. You're going to put in as many hours as possible. There's nothing else that matters. It's just all about the materialistic success. It's all about getting the money. And a lot of times, a lot of these guys are only, or women, are only trying to succeed because then they want to be better than some jackass that they don't even like anyway, right? It's like, I need a better car than him because I don't really like the guy, or I need a bigger house, or this and that. And we're not taught the fundamentals of what makes like a good person. Like, and it's just obvious with what's going on in our world today. I mean, 78% of the people are obese or overweight, right? 70% of people live in a constant state of dehydration. 131 million people are on some kind of prescription drug. Um, Half the people don't even breathe right. There's a study done that 50% of people are mouth breathers in the world today. And it's just, it goes on and on and on. And none of those things are ever taught in school. What we're getting taught is some crazy crap that whatever the narrative is in this for that generation, right?
Yeah, and that's a really important part of it, whatever the narrative is for that generation, because what that narrative is speaks to the current culture, which of course the culture is designed by all of us. When I insert myself or project my thoughts, views, opinions, my ways of being, then that informs the culture. And likewise with you and with every other individual. So then we craft a story together, but it's always going to be the loudest voices. And so then that becomes what we then pass on, which typically, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, that's going to be some version of a trauma story that keeps us locked down. And it sounds like that's what I hear just from my lens, where I come from. That's what I hear you talking about.
It, you know, it's also who has the biggest amount of money, right? With that narrative, it's like it's either what they can say the loudest or who can spend the most amount of money. And that's, it just happens. And that's that whole pendulum thing that it happens in everything. It's ebb and flow. It's heat, hot and cold are on the same line. It's just a matter of what degree it's on. And I've started using that in life a lot too, because like I hated like I use that word hate so much, and but what I found is it's on that same line of love. It just where how far over do I need to move it to stop hating something, to like it, to love it. And that just helped my little brain out because when it just made it simple, right? That was that thermostat for the hate to love. It was the thermostat for hot to cold. It was my thermostat for having empathy for people. Um, and that was my way of dealing with it.
I love that visual. And it helps you kind of just assess where you are, where you want to be, and start to toggle over in the direction that feels like it's more in alignment with you and where you want to be. So how do you notice when maybe you're a little out of alignment?
I've become so like aware of where I'm at now because of being able to meditate, being able to just set everything aside. But if I feel like I'm a tad bit off, I do a reset. And my reset is, I usually fast for 48 to 72 hours. Um, I don't know if I should say it, but I've also like with some of the mushrooms, I've done a lot of studying with that. So I've microdosed and I've also macrodosed, and I do it under a very stringent way. Like I use frequencies and meditation, and it's just a full reset for myself, my mind, and my body. And they do have some negative thing around the whole mushroom, and everything does. But I'll tell you what, I've never tried a drug in my entire life. And that was the first time I ever did it. But I've had more breakthroughs with those little things. And I'm not advocating that everybody runs out there and grab mushrooms and just, start tripping. But if you do it, with meditation and doing it under the right circumstances, there are little ways that definitely help free up the mind and unravel some of those little knots that are up there in your brain. And a lot of those little knots are going to be caused by the crap that we eat, the stuff that they put in our water, the horrible medications that are out there. It's those knots are put there on purpose, and that's my some of the knots, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I've never microdosed either, but I do know a lot of people who have, and it can be, from what I have been told, extremely therapeutic. You really, it's almost like timeline jumping. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept, but it really shortcuts the journey from where you are to where you want to be in a big way, and just is maybe literally mind blowing. It really just opens your perception.
1,000%. I don't know how much you've studied about like fluorides, but all the different stuff that's in our water and our foods, they actually capped a lot of the our receptors in our brain, which are almost like little mushroom shaped receptors, right? And they're calcified. A lot of them don't even work. There's no firing process going across there. But what I've found is like it it was almost like, have you ever watched that movie Limitless, where the guy took the little blue pill and he could like see everything?
Yeah.
When I was closing car deals and I had it so dialed in, like I could walk through the door and within 2 words, I would know how to close the car deal or if I was going to close it. It was that I was that dialed in. And it just stemmed from being all those things, right? Self-aware. And you can feel the vibrations that people are giving off. The more you're better about yourself and more in tune with yourself, the more in tune you're going to be with everything around you. And it is pretty amazing. And it all starts again with breath work. It is breath work and the proper amount of sleep are like two of the things that so many people just lack. And if they just did that, they could change their life like 60%, 70%. I don't even know what the percentage is, but a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I and that's the funny thing about it, right? It's so simple. Those are like the most basic biological needs. Sleep and breathe. Go figure. But our trauma like locks us up. And I learned, about myself years ago that I have this tendency to just stop breathing. And when I learned that, I'm like, what in the world? Why would I just stop breathing? I didn't realize I was doing that. But my body would go into that freeze state, and next thing I knew, I was gasping for air. Like, how do you just stop breathing? But it's a natural biological response if we don't feel safe and we go into that possum mode. And which, of course, we all know the sleepless nights. We've all struggled with insomnia. But yeah, those basic things of just meeting those core biological needs. And even with the fluoride and other stuff, calcifying parts of our brain. And I don't know the science behind that. I've read tidbits, and I'm only vaguely familiar with it, but not to get too woo-woo, but I've heard a lot about that as far as the third eye goes. I don't know if you're into chakras at all, but the third eye, the pineal gland, if I am not mistaken, can
Yep.
become calcified, and then we lose our ability to connect with our own intuition. And so doing things like microdosing, and it doesn't have to be microdosing. There's a lot of ways that we can, reconnect with our intuition, and going fluoride free could be one of those ways. There's a lot, the breathing, all of those things can help us reconnect with our intuition. And then that's when you said you can walk into a room and just feel, right? Because now you're more connected with yourself and your authenticity, and that's where your intuition lies.
100%. That's awesome the way you said it. It really is awesome. Um, it I again go back to the breathing thing because when you were talking about stopping breathing, is there's a little study done that shows when people start watching, um, scrolling through their phone, that people tend to mouth breathe,
Hmm.
and mouth breathing is absolutely horrible for you. There's a little saying that you should breathe through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose, and obviously we don't do that very often, right? But it a lot of it's just is because the technology and how our world is set up. We're under constant stress, where before you would only be under stress, like when the tiger was chasing you or whatever, and then you might breathe a little bit heavy. But now, like, we're set up where it's a constant stress. So people, like, the cortisol hardly ever gets flushed from the body. So, which, makes it harder to sleep. Our circadian rhythms are jacked up because we have blue light coming from this computer, from that phone, from the TV. So that jacks up the circadian rhythm. So the melatonin levels are messed up. And then and then the food that we eat, our serotonin, like 80% of that comes from our gut.
Hmm.
Um, and our gut health is absolutely horrible. If you look around, most people's guts are hanging over their pants. And so obviously, and then what's the other thing? 80% of our detoxification is actually done through breathing. And when you're not breathing right, you're not detoxing. You're just holding all that crap in.
Exactly. And then all of that translates into holding in the emotions and not being able to forgive and things like that we started out talking about.
100%. And that's why they say, physiology drives psychology.
Yes.
When you're doing, when you're sleeping good, when you're breathing good, when you've just taken the right amount of steps. I mean, the Americans average less than 4,000 steps a day, which, at 5,600, there's all kinds of extra hormone stuff that goes on. You get a testosterone boost, you get a flush of the cortisol, you get this, that, and we're not even reaching the point to get the minimum. So, because, a lot of us, unfortunately, we all sit around and nobody's ever told us not to sit around.
Or at least not in a way that makes sense. We're told some things like we know we're supposed to move, but okay, why? What are the real repercussions? Those dots are not connected for us when we're learning this stuff in health class in elementary school and junior high and high school where we couldn't care less about those things. So how can we make those lessons make sense to a kid in age appropriate ways and make it meaningful to them so that when they grow up, they're doing these things and taking care of themselves?
For me, the whole educational system needs a revamp in the first place. I
Agreed.
mean, it's the first thing that jacks up people's sleep, because high schoolers need the most amount of sleep. That's the time that our brains and all our emotions and everything's working. And yet half the schools start before 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, whatever the freaking time is. But it prohibits the people from getting the 7, 8, more closer to 8 to 9 hours of sleep at that time. That's when we're the most sleep efficient, but our system is cutting them off. So so you're already putting people behind the eight ball at that age. And it's just crazy that and there's studies done that shows this. And if it shows it, why not fix it? I mean, we don't allow, 18-year-olds or 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds to drink, but we're going to put them in a spot that it's even worse than drinking because lack of sleep ends up being worse than drinking down the long run. And it's proven time after time, even with switching the time back, right? That when you spring forward, in the spring, when we spring forward that 1 hour, heart attacks go up 25% that day, and road accidents go up like 25 to 30% that day. 1 hour of sleep one night causes that much drama.
Wow, I had no idea. That's an incredible statistic.
I just learned that one. That was one of the ones that I was going through this little it's called Why We Sleep. It's a fantastic book, but it was something based in there.
Hmm. Wow, that's really interesting. And yeah, you bring up a really good point with teenagers needing so much more sleep. I think it's like babies, teenagers, and the elderly. Those are times when our body is just going through so much, so many changes. So there's all this internal stuff, this internal heavy lifting. But in our culture, where we tend to be more externally focused, and so, well, it doesn't look like you're doing anything Mr. 15-year-old. It looks like you're being lazy. So get your butt up, go to school, go to work, get a job, have all of these extracurricular activities. And one thing that's been interesting to observe, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on this, is it's almost like parents we have overcrowded our own schedules, but we still feel this need to outrun our thoughts, to outrun our feelings. But if I can't cram another thing into my schedule, well, I need to teach my kid how to be a productive member of society. And so let me start dumping onto them and let me start overfilling their schedule.
Wow. That is dang. Yeah, that is one of those little things. We I think you hit on it earlier, is like you had a boundary you set up with your mom, right?
Mhm.
And it caused some issues. And in today's world, so many people lack boundaries. We take on everything you possibly freaking can until you explode. But truly being healthy is having healthy boundaries set up. Like I have a buddy, he's a amazing guy and he works a lot, but he was leaving work one night and some lady wanted to chat with him. So they started chatting for an hour and a half. And instead of being home with his wife and kids, he was stuck chatting with this lady for an hour and a half that he could easily set this schedule, hey, let's schedule this tomorrow at lunch, right? And and that's just one little example, but like there's hundreds of those every single day, every single week that if you actually pay attention to what's going on in your life, there's so many little things that you could cut out that you don't need. And yeah, sometimes it sucks to say no, but for your own well-being, you have to do it. You have to be able to have that time with yourself or with your family or whatever. And setting those boundaries is monumental.
Yeah, it really is. It's game changing to live a boundaried life. Not that those boundaries hem you in. It's kind of it's exactly the opposite. Those boundaries help you express and grow, but in healthy directions. And yeah.
I just wanted, just because you said that, like the healthy direction things, it if you watch any sport, every sport has boundaries, right?
Mhm.
How freaking boring would sports be without boundaries? Like, if there was no rules or no boundaries, you wouldn't know what the hell is going on. And that's kind of like if you have your life set up with some boundaries, now you know what's going on. You can enjoy it more because you have a foundation of, the boundaries. And it's just huge. I just wanted to add that because of the way you said the direction thing.
And that's perfect. I'm going to borrow that analogy because you're so spot on with that. That is why
It's
people
crazy.
engage in sports and watch sports is because, ooh, they did it right, they did it wrong. Maybe I shouldn't say right or wrong. that's very judgmental, but oh,
I'm gonna go with you. Yes.
yeah. But it keeps us engaged because you're right. We know what's going on because we have those rules and those boundaries. And when we don't in our life, going back to this thing called life, so many of the time, so oftentimes, we have no idea what's going on in our life. And it does feel like it's just so all over the place. We feel so lost. We're stuck in the people pleasing, not able to set that boundary and say, hey, I'm on my way home, but let's schedule a lunch or something like that, because that people pleasing locks us down, or that perfectionism locks us down, or that our thoughts start creeping up. If we take a moment to breathe, then we might start feeling things and we might start thinking things, and oh, we don't know what to do with the thoughts and the feelings, so let me stop breathing, let me run harder and faster and outrun myself. So there are really good reasons we do these things, but then just bringing awareness to, what am I doing? Why might I be doing it? What could I be doing instead? And it sounds like that's the entire journey that landed you here.
Yeah, it honestly is. That's once I figured out how jacked up I was, and then once I mainly fixed myself, I'm not perfect. I'm gonna make a ton of mistakes, but now I'm okay with it. I'm just like, it is what it is, right? Um, and I found that that is powerful, just being able to go, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And now I would love just to be able to, help and just give that awareness. And I hate to say, but guys are the worst. Because we're, especially from back in my area, we were all taught just to shut up and suck it up, dude. Don't want to hear nobody whining and crying. But then it became too much, right? Now everybody wants to whine and cry. We got to hear everybody's little, so again, that swings, right? So we need to bring it back this way a little bit where, yeah, you can be a man and still have emotions.
Hmm.
Now you don't have to be a man running around crying all the time and whining and acting like, because you still have to take accountability for your own stuff and respond and react. And in a lot of ways, the women even did the same thing, because like women became like where they were like almost hard asses for a little while, right? Everybody was so women were super tough and they had to be more tough than what they were, because it's not good to be ladylike. So now you start seeing that starting to come back a little bit. And I think we just need to meet someplace in that nice little middle area where everybody can get back along again, because we separated so much on both, everything, politics, sexism, even, anything that we were swinging like this. I don't know where it's going to stop, or maybe someday the balls are going to hit each other, and when we might have that awakening where everybody goes, "Holy shit, man, we got to fix some stuff." And I think people are starting to get a little more there with a lot of the things.
I think so too. I think the internet has really enabled that ability. You and I can sit here and have this conversation and reach people all over the world for years to come. People can stumble across this episode, right? And how cool is that? And
Yeah.
that's just this one conversation. And I don't know about you, but I meet my clients online on Zoom. So ditto, I have clients from around the globe. So now we're coming from different cultures and different backgrounds, and we have different perspectives, which is going to help shifts that are going to be different than when I'm working with people within my own culture. And there's pros on both of those with both of those examples, but just having this ability beyond TV even to have conversations like this and interactions like this that are just real and unscripted and just human to human is really giving us the platform to reach more people and to be heard, right? We all have those parts of us that need to be heard. And that's what I heard you saying with the reactionary, that pendulum swing. We get into those reactionary parts that I just need to be heard and I'm going to rebel against where I was coming from or what I am told I should be. And so then we're just reacting. But then in that middle part, we can settle into responding where we're engaged at that deep biological level, knowing how to sleep and breathe and tend to our needs, and we can choose how we want to respond or not.
It's funny because technology has its obviously there's fantastic uses of it, right? Like you said, connecting with people you would have never connected. We would have never connected if it wasn't for all the technology out there. It's the same thing as money. It's how you use it, right? Money doesn't make a bad person, or money doesn't make a person bad or good, but money can make a bad person worse, and it makes a good person even better. So like if you use technology in that same form, you're going to be able to spread your good stuff even further. But unfortunately, right now, too many people are spreading all the bad crap, right? And everybody, hate this way, hate this way, and it's that divisiveness that they just I don't know who's they, but they love it to, love us to look that way while something's happening over here, right? Squirrel, oh, okay, everybody looks that way. Um, I mean, it goes even to our sporting events. I used to be a huge like sport fan, but then the more like I started being okay with myself, like people's identities are wrapped up around what team won or lost. I mean, their entire month can go to crap just because their team lost. And dude, that team does not give one rat's ass about you. And it's the same thing, like all the way down the road. It's just funny.
Mhm. Well, it sounds like maybe some of those people could be your future clients.
Maybe.
So you have a gift for the audience, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you go on ernestwood.com, you can actually download a free copy of the book. You can also go there if you like any of the stuff that you heard and book a call, and we can just do a call, and it's kind of like a find out where you're at call. Um, so yeah, or if you decide to buy the book, it's actually on Amazon, and I use all profits go to helping. Right now, I'm helping one little guy. He's 7 years old from Hawaii. He has leukemia, so all profits are going to help him. Next month, they're probably going to go help somebody else. But I just try to use the book just as profits are just going to do my act of kindness. Um, you know, is it? It's probably not life-changing money any of the time, but it's a little something that I can give. And if you decide that you want to give instead of getting the free book, you can go buy it at Amazon, or you can download the free book and hopefully, learn a little something about it, or learn a little something about yourself.
That's an incredible offer. So you can have the free book or you can pay it forward. And oh, that's brilliant. Just very beautiful. I love that you're doing that.
Thank you.
Ernie, this has been a wonderful conversation. Frankly, I could just keep on going. It's just been fun to connect and really interesting that both of us had 14-year-old mothers because that's not something I've ever come across. So that was really intriguing to just be able to chat about that. And it's been a joy to have the opportunity to get to know you and to hear your story and to see the incredible person that you have chosen to be now.
Well, I appreciate you, Amy. It is kind of weird to find somebody else. 14-year-old moms are not, I don't think, hopefully there's not a whole lot of them because that's a challenging situation.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So, but Amy, it's been an absolute pleasure, and it's fun.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Becoming and Belonging. I'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from today's episode? Share your thoughts, reflections, any questions that came up. You can connect on social media or leave a comment wherever you're tuning in to keep the conversation going. If you found this episode meaningful, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Until next time, keep growing, keep healing, and remember, you belong here.